Welcome to All Things Foster. We're going to air last week's podcast with Robyn again. We strongly believe in the work that she does and would like everyone to get a chance to hear her insight. Thank you again, Robyn, for taking your time to speak with us.
Hello and welcome to All Things Foster, a place for coffee, connection, and community. Grab your coffee, sit in your easy chair, and I'm super excited today because I get to talk to one of my heroes, Robyn Gobbel. So thank you so much for coming on today.
I'm just delighted to be here with you this morning. And I also have my coffee.
Yes, I drink way too much, but anyways, we'll get into that. So, thank you to our episode sponsor today, Kristy Hood Agency from Farmers Insurance, conveniently located at 4300 Tekla Boulevard, Suite 16, open Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5:30, Saturday by appointments. As a trusted local agent, we are here to help protect what matters most. Whether it's your home, car, business, or life, we are dedicated to offering personalized service and solutions that fit your needs. So stop by or give us a call today at 806-318-2555. Se habla español. Okay, so the title of today's episode is The Power of Connection, a conversation with Robyn Gobbel. So Robyn, again, thank you so much for coming on today.
I'm delighted. Just delighted to be here.
Well, so I was introduced, I was on a Facebook, closed Facebook group for foster parents in Texas, and was just desperate for some resources a couple years ago. And, I just put out there like, guys, we're drowning. We need help. And so somebody on there recommended this podcast called The Baffling Behavior Show. Mm-hmm. And so I started listening to it avidly, and it really helped me. And so then when the book came out, I pre-ordered it. I was super excited. We read it. We decided it was so good. And so her book, the Raising Kids with Big Baffling Behaviors, every foster parent that receives a placement package in the Panhandle gets a copy of this book because we feel like it is so important. The way that Robyn kind of breaks things down, and Nat on the first page says, I knew it was going to be hard. I didn't know it was going to be this hard. And that's the sentiment that we get from all of our families, is it's just so hard and we just didn't know. And so yeah. Her work is really, really important to me personally, to our family. And so I wanted to have her on here and let her share with you guys a little bit about her, about the book, the club, and all the things that she's doing. So Robyn, just a little bit on your background. How did you, what got you into this trauma place?
There's so many ways I could go with that question. I mean, and I look back, I think I've wanted to work with kids with really out of control behaviors. Like, I've wanted to work with the kids that kind of nobody else wanted to. Mm. And maybe that was kind of some appeal to me, was like the nobody else wanted to part. It's hard to say, but I've really wanted to do that work since high school. There's this woman named Tori Hayden, and she's a special educator and a psychologist, I think, and she wrote memoirs that really read like fiction that I discovered in high school, like in my high school library. And she essentially did this work that I was like, that's what I want to do. She works with just the hardest kids. And I continue actually to reread those books on occasion. So I've been relatively one-tracked for most of my career. When I did all of my like practicums and internships in graduate school, I was working with kids who had histories of trauma, abuse, neglect. Always been really interested in the diagnosis of reactive attachment disorder. And when I was in graduate school, we were using reactive attachment disorder kind of differently than we do now. So in some ways, like, I feel like it's kind of hard to say, like, why these kids, why this work.
Yeah.
It's just what I've always wanted to do. And in most ways, it's all I actually ever have done, for better, or for worse.
Right.
So when we were in Austin, I had a private practice, worked with kids, mostly post-adoption. Most of them were in adoptive families, just because of the way the insurance worked and all that kind of good stuff. I tended to work with post-adoptive families and did that relatively exclusively. Like usually 85% of my caseload was kids and their adoptive families. And then it was very clear to me very early that nobody else, not even nobody else, because I didn't really know what to do either. Nobody knew what to do with these kids.
Yeah.
And their parents didn't. And as professionals, we didn't. And I think in some ways I was like new blood. And, when I started working, and it was like, oh, Robyn, she likes these kids. Send them all there. And there came a point where I was like, well, I can't take all these kids. I don't have space, right? I can only work so many hours a week.
Right.
And there was nowhere else to send them. Nobody else would take them. So then I started also really loving to do like professional development. And I remember so clearly having the thought that, like, I'm not an expert in this by any means, but I have a little more experience than these other folks do. And so I might as well try to offer that to them and see if I can be helpful and there can be more people in the community who are, able to work with these families.
Right. Yeah. From a personal perspective, there is just not enough support mechanisms for families that are struggling with kiddos that have traumatic issues. And so that's really why your work is just so stinking important. So talk to us about the book. How did you decide? I mean, I've thought at times, like, I wonder what it'd be like to write a book. I read a lot.
Same.
And everything, but writing a book is totally different than reading one. So what was the impetus to say, I'm going to sit down and write this book?
I think I'm a voracious reader. I would call reading a hobby of mine. I love books. I love information. I love words. So I think there's probably a part of me that's always had, write a book on the bucket list of things I would maybe do one day. And it's one of those things that it's hard. It's a lot of work. I didn't know how to do it. So it just never, made itself to the top of my list of priorities.
Yeah.
And then, like everybody else in the whole wide world, life really changed in March of 2020.
Right.
And it changed for a whole lot of reasons. But for sure, one of the things I really reckoned with was, how do I want to impact? What do I want to do next at this stage of my career? How can I help as many people as possible, given all of the privileges that I have? And also because it was the pandemic, things that were normally drawing or pulling at my attention maybe weren't as much. And so I also acknowledged I have no idea how to write a book. So I hired somebody. I'm a big fan of hiring help.
Yeah.
So I hired a book proposal coach who helped me write a proposal for a publisher. But actually, she ended up doing so much more than that. She really helped me organize my content in a way I had never previously really put into such an organized way.
Yeah.
Which has helped me in every aspect of my work.
So this was long after starting the podcast. When did you start the podcast?
So the podcast aired the first time in December of 2020.
Oh, okay. So you started considering the book before you started the podcast, or was it around the same?
It was, I'd have to really pause and think about this, but I think it was probably about the same time, actually.
Yeah.
That this also coincided with some things happening in my personal life that kind of, I think, allowed it all to germinate at about the same time. So I started the podcast. It was the Parenting After Trauma podcast.
Right.
Started the club. And I think it probably was right about the same time where I said, okay, it's time to do this for real. And so I hired this woman who did help me write a proposal and get a publisher, but really she helps me create what y'all see now, which is this very organized approach.
Right.
It wasn't so organized before.
Yeah.
And once I worked with her, I wouldn't say writing the book was easy, but once I worked with her, writing the book was not the hardest part of this journey by any means. I just kind of sat down and wrote it. Publishing a book is hard.
Yeah, I don't doubt.
But the writing it was fun. What I really needed to do, and you've kind of mentioned that already, I remember walking on my treadmill and really thinking, like, if I'm going to write a book and I'm going to essentially like take people's time, like someone like you who's desperate for help, picks up a book, like if I'm going to take that person's time, I want it to be worth it. Yeah. So I don't want to just write another parenting book. Right. Lots of great parenting books out there. Lots of books I recommend already. I didn't want to just write another parenting book. So I really pondered, how do I want to do it differently in a way that could impact people differently, which is why I ended up writing it the way that I did.
And I've read a ton of different parenting books and worked my way through some really intense trauma books and stuff like that. But the way that Robyn wrote this book is just, it's impactful. It's very impactful. So before we kind of, I do want to dig into the flow of the book. But before we do, let's talk about the owl, the watchdog, and the possum.
Yeah.
First of all, did you come up with that delineation?
So yes, and the reality is it isn't the most original metaphor ever. I mean, lots of people are using similar metaphors. And also, I spent 15 years as a play therapist and more than that with kids. And so much of the language really kind of started with them. I think one of the things I'm good at is being, very observational and really, I think it made me a good therapist, really paying attention to what's happening for people or what they're expressing, but having trouble finding the words to express. And in general, I feel like it was kind of a collaboration between me and the kids that I worked with.
Sure.
In finding these metaphor words, which in metaphor kind of works that way. Like metaphors land for a lot of people. So the idea of the owl and the watchdog and the possum, again, I think other folks are using similar metaphors.
Yeah.
But it feels like it was a joint effort between me and the kids that I was working with.
Sure. So let's talk about them. What are the owl, the watchdog, and the possum for our listeners?
So they started as describing different brain states. And the reason it was so important for me to come up with some kind of metaphor, but also some sort of metaphor. The reason that animals are important is because it's pretty easy for kids to make a relationship with an animal. And that's actually an important part of the whole process. So it really started largely based on Dr. Bruce Perry's work. And Dr. Perry has a theory of what he calls state-dependent functioning and the arousal continuum. And he talks about the arousal state of calm, which is loosely correlated to the owl. And then as soon as, the brain flips onto the arousal continuum and it goes down either the fight-flight pathway or the dissociation pathway.
Right.
And so the fight-flight pathway now maps over to what I would call the watchdog pathway, and then the dissociation pathway really maps over to what I would call the possum pathway. And Dr. Perry is largely talking about brain states. He's really thinking about the brainstem and the diencephalon and the limbic areas and the prefrontal cortex, and how arousal and activation shift essentially kind of what area of the brain is most online.
Right.
And then over the years, I also was introduced to a theory of the autonomic nervous system, the polyvagal theory.
Right.
And there's actually a decent amount of overlap in how these two theories are conceptualizing humans and energy and activation and arousal. Dr. Perry's kind of thinking more about the brain. Polyvagal theory thinks more about the autonomic nervous system. And so the three, owl, watchdog, and possum, also map over to the polyvagal theory and to our autonomic states of safety, danger, and life threat, and how our body responds
Sure.
to those different states. So owls and watchdogs and possums are kind of like a mashup of Dr. Perry's brain states and Dr. Porges's polyvagal theory. And the intention really is to help us, the grown-ups and the kids, make sense of, in a non-judgmental and compassionate way, why we're doing what we're doing. Because sometimes it's really baffling.
It's like, what in the world just happened?
Exactly. Did that answer your question? Was that too brainy?
Yeah. So basically, the owl, the watchdog, and the possum are representatives of where we're at mentally and how we're acting. And so, do you mind just kind of a brief overview what the owl means, the watchdog, the possum?
Yep. So the owl is the part of the brain or the nervous system state that emerges or in charge when we are experiencing safety and connection. The owl brain, the owl pathway helps us kind of be our best selves, be our truest selves, operate out of like the highest part of our brain that's possible. I mean, like a 3-year-old and their owl brain and a 40-year-old and their owl brain, of course, aren't the same. They're slightly different. So I think about it as like the highest, most grown-up parts of self possible, where we can really use all of our cognitive skills. We can, so not only is it like this thinking part of the brain where we're accessing those highest cortical skills, but it's also the part of the brain that's feeling safe and connected.
Right.
So it's an embodied part. It's in a relational space. The owl is responsible for behaviors that are, bringing us into connection, or behaviors that other people like and want to be in connection with.
And that's one thing I do want to point out here. Robyn makes a statement that it echoes through everything, through the book, through the podcast, through the club, is that regulated, connected kids who feel safe do well.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we're interacting with a child that is safe, feels safe, felt safety, those are the times when they're doing the thing that they need to be doing. That they want to hug, they want to kiss, they eat their dinner, whatever it is that they're doing, and so that premise of connection is just absolutely crucial to really understanding the whole premise of Robyn's work. And so that's something we've got to establish now, is that I love that saying that regulated, connected kids who feel safe do well. And so when they're in that owl state, that's when they're feeling connected, right? That's when they have the ability to think, to do the things that they need to do. And that's when we want to connect with them. But having that connection is the most important. On my perspective, the most important piece of your work is that connection, right?
I think so. I mean, like you, my uh, connection to this work is kids who have been hurt in relationship. There are a lot of people who are picking up the book and finding, really resonating with it, who are parenting kids who have a lot of baffling behaviors and a lot of vulnerability in their nervous system, but they don't have that history necessarily of that attachment trauma. But for those of us who are, especially parenting with or working with or know people who have had that connection-based trauma, I do think, and that's why it's such a central part of the model, that like reminding ourselves that at our core, humans don't just want to connect with one another, they need to. I mean, it's a literal requirement for survival.
Right.
And I also know that a lot of us are parenting kids who act like the last thing they want is to be connected to us or anyone else.
Right.
And that is a pretty demoralizing place to be, right? To be in relationship with somebody who is making it very clear they don't want connection with you or anyone else. So then we fall into hopelessness, helplessness, or anger, rage, which is not good for us. So for me, that piece of remembering that that connection, Dr. Porges says, connection is a biological imperative. We need connection. Literally, we need connection to survive. It's how our brains develop. It is our default. It is a core part of our humanity. So if I'm with somebody who is rejecting connection, behaving in a way that's making me not want anything to do with them, really kind of making themselves unconnectable. Which is very different than someone who's just like, hey, I'm kind of connected out. I'd like some alone time, right? Those are very different experiences.
Right.
I think it's crucial that we see this child who's rejecting connection, and as much as possible, try to remember, like, hey, something's not right here. Something's not right. They literally need connection to survive. So what's going on here, which keeps our curiosity on board.
The curiosity piece is super. Yeah. So let's get back to the possum, owl, and watchdog. So we talked about the owl. That's the higher thinking, however higher they're able to, whether that's a 4-year-old or a 40-year-old. That's the owl brain. So then the watchdog, and I know that there's multiple facets but
the simplest way I think to just look at it is, the owl emerges when the nervous system's feeling safe and connected. When the nervous system starts to experience a lack of safety, danger, or life threat, the nervous system shifts from connection mode to what I call protection mode. And in protection mode, there's these two pathways: the watchdog pathway, the possum pathway. The watchdog pathway is a pathway of energy and increased activation. So the watchdog maps over to what we would call like the fight-flight state of our body. The watchdog pathway is the pathway of sympathetic activation. It fuels our body. We're getting more energy in our arms and our legs. We're breathing faster. Our heart is, beating faster. Like everything's increased on the watchdog pathway. And it's a protective pathway. So it's still the behaviors that emerge from the watchdog pathway are often rejecting connection in lieu of finding safety, and like that starts to prioritize safety. And then the possum pathway is another protective pathway, but instead of an increase in energy, which fuels our arms and our legs so we can run or fight or scream or yell or kick or whatever, the possum pathway is a pathway essentially that takes over when that doesn't work, right? Like when fighting, running, fleeing, it won't keep you safe. A possum pathway is a pathway of kind of the opposite, like of a collapse, decrease of energy. So instead of running and fighting and fleeing, the possum, loses energy in its arms and legs and collapse, gets smaller, talks less, heart rate decreases, breathing decreases, some dissociation can emerge. So these are two physiological pathways. The pathways aren't metaphorical. They're real pathways in our brain, in our nervous system that, help us stay safe under threat.
Yeah. And the more we use one of those pathways, the more it's going to come out. Right?
Exactly. Like anything else, the more we practice something, the more like the more that pathway is exercised, the more we're going to use that pathway.
And so that a lot of times that can develop where the child, early on leans towards either the possum or the watchdog, and so depending on how the child responded to the trauma, that's more likely the direction that they're going to go. Right. Not necessarily always, but
exactly. I mean, there's a lot of complicating factors, but generally speaking, most of us do have kind of a default pathway.
Yeah.
Most of us would say like, oh yeah, I'm a fighter, or I'm a fleer, or I'm a collapser. And just like you said, it's not 100% of the time, but usually based on our experiences and our environment, there tends to be sort of a go-to pathway because we've discovered it works best for us.
Right. Yeah. So the book's been out, is it up to 2 years now?
Almost in September. It'll be 2.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep.
what has the response been? I mean, what you get feedback from families. What has the response been from this book?
Generally, I mean, almost exclusively, the response has blown my mind and just extremely positive. I mean, what I'm hearing from people is the metaphor is helpful. The metaphor makes sense. The metaphor works for them and their kids. Again, these were things I sort of knew because I was watching it be true in my office, right? Like the kids were kind of using the metaphor, but it worked great for the grownups too.
Mm-hmm.
So folks that have seemed to really resonate with the metaphor, people have, which is what I'd hoped, people have really resonated with the way the book was written. And I think it's helping people feel a lot more compassionate and understanding, not just to their kids, but to themselves, which is really, I think that is a missing piece in a lot of parenting work. And it's the most important piece. Yeah.
See it or maybe that's, and so let's talk about that. How the book is written with Nat. So talk to us about Nat.
Yeah, so Nat's a fictional character who is essentially just kind of a composite of, all the parents I've worked with over the years. People say I saw myself in Nat, and I yes, because there's actually not that much difference, right? That over and over and over again, people come into my office and literally say the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So kind of creating that wasn't very challenging in a way that made people go like, oh, I really relate to her, because truly people say the same thing over and over and over again. It's heartbreaking. So Nat is a fictional character, and the book follows Nat over what's probably about a year of parent coaching sessions. Each chapter opens with kind of a bird's eye view of a parenting session, and I'm speaking in first person. So I really wanted the reader to, as the pages, kind of unfolded and they got into the rhythm of the book, I really wanted the reader to feel like I was talking to them.
Yeah. Because which is, personally, that's how it feels to me. I mean, it's like she's reading my journal. Like,
yeah.
I mean, and that, my wife had a procedure yesterday, and as she was coming out, there was a lady that was the nurse, and she saw my shirt, and she was like, "You guys work with orphans or something?" And so we got to talking, and she literally said the exact same thing that Nat said, and I've heard it so many times, but I knew it was going to be hard. I didn't know it was going to be this hard. And that you set the tone at the beginning with, I see you, and I feel where you're at, and I want to help you with that. And that to me, and to the folks that I've talked to that have read the book, that's how they feel. They feel like they're sitting there in the office with Robyn going through this stuff.
I mean, I'm so glad. That was my hope. And I kind of took a risk. I wasn't sure if this idea that I had was going to work, but I did have a lot of intentionality. I mean, I know a little bit about how the brain changes, and I've done, so much work with people one on one in the office. And so I was seeing like what seems to matter, especially parents who are coming to me like who are bringing their children to me, but then I was getting time with the parents. That's not exactly therapy, right? Like, yeah, I was the therapist, but I wasn't exactly doing therapy with the parents in many circumstances, most circumstances. And so I spent a lot of time thinking like, so what did matter? What was so helpful to those parents beyond the work I was doing with their kids? What were they saying to me about what was so helpful? But also, by the time I started writing the book, I'd been blogging and had an email newsletter for years. I probably started my blog in 2012 or something like that. And so I would get emails from people and they would say things like, I can hear your voice in my head, or I look forward to getting your emails every week. That's kind of like my dose of co-regulation. And what those messages meant to me was that I could create this relationship with folks in a way that changed their brains. Like for someone to say, I hear your voice in my head, I go, oh, something has changed in your brain. You have internalized my regulation because the voice you're hearing in your head is a nice one who's being compassionate and, oh, so I understand. I'm like, oh, that means your brain has changed in this way, and you've and we've never even met before. In fact, all you've ever done is read my emails in my blog. Then I started podcasting, and I started getting even more of those emails. But my point is I was getting feedback from people that let me know if I approach this in a specific way, if the reader can feel like I'm actually talking to them, that will change their brain. Not unlike the way that people's brains were changing when they actually came to my office. It's not the same, but it's pretty darn close.
I mean, without making a few clones of you. I mean, it's I'm in Amarillo. I wasn't going to Austin to get counseling, and I'm not going up there either. So
yeah,
I mean,
that's astounding to me. I mean, I think that's just miraculous that I can sit here in my office and I can podcast and I can write a book, and folks are feeling more compassionate towards themselves.
Yeah.
Folks are feeling more regulated. Parents are growing their metaphorical owl brain.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing that through this relationship that exists on the page or exists in their earbuds. And I don't know, that's amazing.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
The information I give people and the tools are, I recognize, very helpful. People really appreciate that. I don't think that that's the most important part of what I do. I think people could get that information a lot of places.
Right.
But without kind of shifting their own nervous system a little bit more towards compassion towards themselves, they can't use any of those tools. So I really wanted the reader to hear my inner dialogue when I'm with a struggling parent. I really wanted the reader to hear what I think and how I feel towards that struggling parent. I wanted them to when you're in my office, I think you feel it, even if I don't necessarily give words to it. But if you're not in my office, I had to find a way to give words to it. And so I wanted them to hear my inner dialogue.
And that's so hard to do on the page.
Yeah.
But you did it. I mean, you absolutely did it. The way in which you wrote the book, and I've read a lot of books. I just finished a book today last fall on what happened to you with Dr. Perry and Oprah. Yeah. It was great. I mean, it was a really, really good book. But we don't put that copy in the placement packages. We put yours because it makes if you take the time to sit down and read it or listen to it, whatever. Yeah.
I'm so glad. Like, that's all I wanted. That's all I wanted. So
yeah, and I think you hit a bullseye. So that's the book / podcast, because really, I mean, it's a both and. I really, and I say this, and I've linked her podcast in the show notes before. I really think you should subscribe to the podcast, because I mean, there's so many episodes, and there's. I was listening this week to the one on cussing, and I was telling my wife, see, like, it's okay for me, not for them.
I don't know if I exactly said it was okay, but we can make sense of it.
Yeah. And what's funny is that I had done a 5-part series on trauma, and she had referenced the same study that and I asked her, I was like, how do they test that? Like
That's a
hit
great
them on the
question.
toe with a hammer and like measure their brain when they said crap versus something.
Maybe. That's a great question.
Yeah, I was curious on that. But anyway, so the book / podcast, you really need to check out both. But let's transition and let's talk about the club, because again, I think it's an integral part. And for $45 a month, I mean, you can't spend $50 better than that, in my opinion. I'm a member of the club, and I turn there when I'm struggling, I guess before we get to, let's talk about co-regulation for a minute, because we really haven't delved into it. So let's talk about that.
Sure. So to talk about co-regulation, let's talk about regulation first. So regulation is a broad term that just basically means balance. The word regulation can apply to a lot of things. When we're talking about it, and when we end up in this way in parenting and in relationships, and when we move into talking about co-regulation, we're talking about the regulation of the energy and arousal of our autonomic nervous system, essentially. Like when I'm regulated, I am in balance. My autonomic nervous system, it matches the situation, right? Like right now I'm safe and we're connected and we're social. So my autonomic nervous system is, resting into this owl brain ventral state. That's a regulated place. And regulation is essentially like a developmental task. We're not born with the capacity to regulate our nervous system without help. We develop the capacity to do that because somebody is offering us a lot of co-regulation for a very, very long time. So co-regulation is really about, this is an oversimplification, what works for right now. Like, you're dysregulated. I'm going to stay regulated and connect with you. I'm going to bring my regulated energy in a way, like kind of energetically offer it to you, because you're struggling to have enough regulation yourself to shift out of dysregulation. You can't do that. So I'm going to offer you my regulation that will help your nervous system return to a more regulated state that you couldn't do by yourself. And over time, if I get enough co-regulation for a long enough period of time, I start to develop the ability to do that myself. Though we need co-regulation until we die. Like we're never meant to stop receiving co-regulation, but eventually, we grow up and have some more capacity to stay regulated slightly. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So co-regulation is that you're upset. Oh, and we should probably mention regulated does not mean calm. You talk about that a lot.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that you're always just level. I mean, it can, but when you match, when I'm upset and you come and match my energy with your regulation, then that helps me to bring down and become regulated.
Yes.
And that's that co-regulation piece. And that to me is a big part of the reason for the club. So the club is, I tell people it's kind of like social media. It's like a social media platform for kiddos who have neurodivergent kids.
Yeah.
Right. And so talk us through that. What is it? How does it work? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it is it's an completely online virtual community, and it is not on a social media platform that is like one of the more popular ones we're probably all familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
but it is on a online platform that feels a lot like some social media platforms we're familiar with. There's a forum, a place for people to connect in the forum, and we have live events, and then we have tons and tons of videos and resources. So that's kind of from a practical place what the club is. I mean, I created the club for similar reasons as I wrote the book, as I saw this huge need. I've always seen this huge need. There's simply not enough support.
Yeah.
And I also was a therapist in a very populated, relatively affluent place of Austin, Texas. Therapy was accessible.
Yeah.
Kind of. There still weren't enough therapists for these kids, but therapy was kind of accessible. I've also been a therapist in a place where therapy is not very accessible. For a whole host of reasons. There's not any therapists. There's families who can't afford therapy. They can't even afford the gas to get to therapy. They've got 5 kids. They all need therapy. There's just a million reasons why therapy is not accessible to families. And I also don't necessarily think that therapy is the best place for kids to heal. I think that it can be a really important addition, but I don't think it's the best and only place that kids can heal. So, with the internet and with all of these cool things that we're experiencing now, and I think the pandemic, in a way, sort of sped this process up of us all feeling so much more comfortable with virtual connection and community and support. But again, I looked at like, how does the brain change? And how can I create that in a way that's more accessible for people? And the club is not in any way, shape, or form a substitute for therapy. But so much of what makes therapy isn't therapy. So much of what makes therapy work is safety, connection, being seen, compassion, boundaries, I'm like, well, those aren't unique to therapy. We can offer those things in all sorts of places. So I created this space that does have some really clear structure. We have very clear expectations of, what the space is for and how we interact with one another and the beliefs that we have about each other. It's so crucial. Folks coming into the club believe everybody else there is doing the very best that they can. And that is actually probably the most important part of the club. When we can believe that about each other, eventually we start to believe it about ourselves and our kids.
Right. I say this a lot on the podcast, but we do better in community.
100%. That's very, first of all, intuitive, but also backed up by science. I mean, there is clear science that says if we have to do something hard, we will use fewer internal resources, meaning essentially it's a little bit less stressful. If we do this hard thing and somebody accompanies us, somebody's there with us, we don't feel alone in it. Even if the hard thing doesn't change at all and it's still super hard, our nervous system experiences that hard thing differently. And so the club, I think, does that for people.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, it's again, I'll go back to the example of the lady I was talking to yesterday. Now her kids that she'd adopted are grown. And she still felt alone. And because one of them has some pretty significant issues, and she was tearing up, we were tearing up, all the things. And she was talking about how she just feels alone, and because it's like nobody outside this can really grasp it. And it's not like there's a foster adopted family on every street corner. So
Right.
Connecting with other, that's part of the reason I started this podcast was to have that community. That's why it's called A Place for Coffee, Connection, and Community. Because we can't just always get together in
Right.
person with somebody. And so if we can listen to a podcast or jump on a social media platform and connect with people that understand,
Right.
like that's, I mean, I could not understand somebody who's got a kiddo that's dealing with leukemia.
Right.
I can't fathom it. I can't help them, but they have groups that help, parents that have kids with cancer or something like that.
Yeah.
And so the club to me is that place where we can go, where we know, do they understand the exact situation that we're going through right now? No.
Sure.
But they know a heck of a lot better what we're going through than Joe Schmo down the street that just says, I went to a Bible study one morning, and this family had just gotten placement of a 3-month-old little girl, and the guy was saying, this family over here, they weren't there, needs prayer because the 3-month-old that they just got is just crying nonstop, won't go to sleep. And one of the guys was like, of course not. She's a 3-month-old. And I wanted to reach over that table and shake him. Like, okay, it's not the same as your
different.
3-month-old daughter that won't stop crying. It's not. It's nothing is familiar for this little 3-month-old.
Yeah.
Right. And so being part of a group of people that just get it. And they may not have an answer to fix it, but you do. You feel seen. You know that, and that's just the forum part. And that doesn't even get into all the resources that are there in the club, all the other documents and the videos and things that aren't just available to everybody. Right. And so in my personal belief, it's really important to join the club and just connect with other people across the world, really, because there's people from all over the world that are in there, and just have folks that can say, "Man, I see you, and I know you're struggling, and I get it."
Well, I think the most remarkable part about the club is y'all, is the people, and how what you just said is literally how people talk to each other in the club. I've never seen anything like this before in my life, right? Like, it's people come in and say all sorts of things. Nothing is surprising in the club. And the responses are always some version of, I see you.
Yeah.
I see you. And also sometimes the responses are, have you tried this? Or what about this? Or this could be helpful, and all of that's spectacular as well.
Sure.
But the magic is I'm not judging you. Like, people say really outrageous things in the club. And it's just like, I get it. Right. I see you. I've felt that way too. And I do feel like I created the structure for that. I set the tone for that. Like, this is how we are with each other.
Yeah.
But now I just sit back and watch it happen.
Right.
And that is so much more powerful. It's so much more powerful for y'all to connect with each other in that way than it is to hear me say the exact same things. And for me, that's the thing that I really marvel at this literally every day. Literally every day. I'm like, I cannot believe these people. Like, these are the most dysregulated, most hurt, like least capacity parents practically on the planet. And look at how they show up for each other.
Yeah.
I mean, it's my favorite part of my work, hands down.
Yeah. I mean, I do. We're getting co-regulation from all these other people all over the world. And it's not like Facebook where you're just in there and you're seeing everybody on vacation and everything's wonderful and happy and all the things. I mean, it's real people dealing with real things and providing co-regulation for each other. That's what it is.
Yeah. I think that's a great tagline. Real people, real problems, real co-regulation. And it's kind of hard to describe.
It is.
And it is amazing to watch unfold.
Yep, and I absolutely love it. So Join the club. You have membership open periodically. I think it was open last week, wasn't it? Or
It was open recently, so we are taking a slightly different approach this year and opening more frequently. It used to be like every 2 or 3 months we'd open for a few days, but we've shifted to kind of every 4, 5, or 6 weeks opening for just a few days, which has shifted the pattern of which people come in a way that I think is working great. I love it.
do so you go to our website, robyngobbel.com/the club,
Yep.
right? And then you can click on there and get the email subscription so that when it opens, you can jump in there.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I've been in there about 18 months. I read the book, like I pre-ordered it, read it as soon as it came out. And then you were on the pattern where it was a little while before, and I was just waiting and waiting and waiting. I could not wait when it finally opened that I could get in there, and just have folks understand.
Yeah, I'm glad you're there.
Powerful.
I'm just so glad. It's amazing.
It is. So let's talk about the immersion program, because
Sure.
like I have, given the work that I do, considered like
I'd love that.
I mean, I have.
Yeah.
So it, we're all in therapy, and it's, I want to go in and be like, okay, I can't stay in my out right or whatever. And they're like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. And so, the immersion program, talk to us about that.
So after I started the club and wrote the book, although certainly before it was published, just hearing from folks like, you need to help other professionals know how to do this. And I've always really enjoyed training professionals, but also really, truly my real love is being with parents. And so I was pouring a lot of energy into that and into the club and to all the resources I was creating for parents. And then it became really obvious, like, well, one way I really help parents is to help professionals.
Yeah.
So the immersion program is a very extensive, very immersive year-long training program for professionals. Most of them are therapists, but not all. I'd say probably 75% are trained mental health clinicians. And the intention of it is to train professionals to be able to support the parents of highly dysregulated kids. And it's the exact same approach. We teach them the neurobiology of behavior. We teach them a ton of tools. And then what really, I think, sets the immersion program apart from most other parent coaching training programs is the emphasis that we place on the presence, on being with one another, on growing our own capacity, our own nervous system capacity to sit with people who are highly dysregulated. Because as you know, parents of highly dysregulated kids are highly dysregulated themselves. And that overwhelms professionals. It overwhelms me too. I'm not immune to that, but it overwhelms professionals. And then that comes out with things like, I don't know how to help this person. I can't help them. But all these things. And then they refer that parent out, or they say, I can't help you anymore, blah, blah, blah. And so that's kind of my heart, is how can I help these professionals, sure, get some new tools so that they feel confident and competent and they can actually help parents. But what they really need even more than that is more energetic capacity to be with parents who are, one, highly dysregulated, and two, who there really is not a lot of help for. And it is hard to be a professional and sit in front of somebody whose world is totally falling apart and to be honest, I'm sorry, but I actually don't have anything that can help you. Not only do I not have it, but actually that thing doesn't even exist. It's hard to sit there and be honest about that you can't really do the thing that they need that would be helpful. And so that's what the immersion program, I think, does. Essentially, we give connection and co-regulation to each other so that we can stay with folks who are in the like absolute depths of it so that we can say, I don't know how to help you, and what you need doesn't exist, but I will not abandon you. That's what I want the professionals who train in the immersion program to get. And then, of course, they get all sorts of other great stuff. They get my parent course. They get unbelievable amounts of resources that help them help people, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it's a year-long training program for professionals.
Yes.
Not necessarily. I mean, I listened to the podcast a few weeks ago where you had the it was a horse.
Oh, Sarah.
Sarah. Yeah.
Yep.
Where they both went through it, and they're not
Nope.
they're not counselors, they're not therapists, they're not psychologists. They just have some work that helps helps families with kiddos that are struggling. And so, it's a program that go through for a year that hopefully helps professionals help those families.
Exactly.
And so you're on a wait list for the 2026 cohort. Is that right?
So we're taking applications. We're next in 2026. I'm running 2 concurrent cohorts for the first time to meet more needs. So one of the cohorts is full and one is not. So we're taking applications until that cohort fills up. Yeah.
So, and then you have a list, right? Where people can go to your website and they can see, hey, this counselor in my area has been through this. We could maybe speak some of the same language because I'm over here reading the book and listening to the podcast, and they've been through this program, so they might be a good resource that maybe I need to go there, right?
Exactly. Yep. We maintain a directory that graduates can opt into, and put themselves in the directory so that people can find them. Yeah.
Because, I mean, as a matter of fact, I had recommended my son's, I got him a copy of the book and my son's counselor and stuff like that. And he was looking into it and stuff because, I mean, not, a therapist isn't just a therapist is a therapist. They're not all the same, and they all have different giftings and talents and things like that. And so if you're over here doing the work with this, then if you were able to find somebody, nearby that had been through this program, that person is probably going to be able to have some of the tools that they might need. So they go to your website and look and see if somebody is close to them that has been through the program.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. So anything we didn't talk about that we should talk about?
Well, we've talked about a lot of things. A lot of things. I think you hit the important ones.
Yeah. Well, I just gotta say so much. I absolutely love your work. It has really helped me personally with my trauma background. It's helped us as we parent our kiddos. And my hope is, as a matter of fact, this gal started working for me part-time, and we had given them, they'd gotten a placement package last fall, and it had been sitting there, and when we connected earlier this year, it was like, oh, maybe I should read that. And I was like, you need to read that. You need to listen to the podcast, and join the club and stuff like that. And so I absolutely love your work. I appreciate so much the empathy that you have in this book for families that are like ours. And guys, it's not just families that have kiddos from hard places. It could be a kiddo that has autism or something like that. That's not neurotypical, right? Yeah. And so that behavior whack-a-mole that Robyn talks about, where you're just trying to stop a behavior, but you're not dealing with the issue behind the behavior. And so I just think it's so stinking critical that people look at your work and really try to incorporate it into their lives, because I truly believe I don't have any other resources that I feel like are as impactful for the families that we serve than your work. And so I just tremendously appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you. It's always nice to, I work alone in my basement. And so it is occasionally nice to be reminded that work is important. So thank you.
It is definitely important to a lot of
Yeah.
folks. And so I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on. What's one thing, if you were talking to a foster parent sitting in your
Mhm.
basement right now, what would you
Mhm.
tell them?
The first thing that came to my mind right now was like, this isn't your fault. This isn't your fault. And it's not the kid's fault either. It's not the kid's fault either. I mean, we're
Yeah.
all just out there struggling in a struggling world.
Yeah.
And what we all need, what parents need, what kids need, truly those things don't actually exist. And so we're just doing the very best we can to meet those needs in the best way that they can. But yeah, that was the first thing that came to my mind. It's not your fault and it's not their fault either.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
totally honest, it's not necessarily the bio parents'
Oh no,
fault either.
100%. So yeah, same. I mean, I think I'm a real big believer in how we can take responsibility for things without taking blame for them. And there are I mean, I do parenting work. Clearly, I think if people make tweaks to their parenting, that things could get better. So yeah, there are things we do as parents that help or don't help. And I'm guilty of the same. I've done things that have not been good as a parent. And that's different. Taking responsibility for something and seeing what you could do different is not the same thing as taking the blame for it. And I believe that for us, and I believe that for parents who've hurt their kids profoundly, and I believe it for the kids too. That
I mean, there's a huge percentage of kids that end up in care whose parents were in care.
100%. Oh
I
yeah,
mean, and it's just
people who are doing well don't hurt their children.
right.
It's just not. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
So sometimes we have to absolutely protect those kids, and we've got to find them a different family, but we can still see their parents through the same lens, which really makes my nervous system feel better.
Yeah.
I don't like walking around with judgment and contempt and indignation. It feels yucky.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Man, I am so stinking. This episode is probably going to resurface several times because it's just your work is so important, and I so want people to be aware of it. And so, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share your heart and your experience.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for what you're doing. This is important. This is so important. So I'm so glad you're doing it, and I'm glad I got to be a part of it.
I appreciate it. There was a survey last January 2024. I was still working full time and running this nonprofit in my quote unquote free time. And I felt God put it on my heart to start a podcast. And I was like, I don't know the first thing about podcasts. What would I even talk about?
Yeah.
And then I got a hold of a survey that the state did in the spring of last year, where they asked families, what are things that you need? What are if you had to rank? And so one of the top things was a place to find out about that families in the Panhandle of Texas asked for was a place to find out about resources because they're hard to find.
Right.
They're out there, but they're hard to find. And so that got the wheels turning, and I was like, maybe that's what the podcast is a place to find resources, but also a place for connection, and then a place to point the community to say, hey, this is foster care. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. So I'm super grateful for it. Thank you again to Kristy Hood from Farmers Insurance for your sponsorship. Guys, we do placement packages for kids coming into foster care. So every kiddo gets a suitcase, a Bible, a teddy bear, a bucket toy, and a blanket, and then whatever else they need. So it could be clothes and diapers and shoes and socks and underwear and all the things. And every family gets a copy of this book. And so In order to make that happen for the families across the 26 counties of the Panhandle, which, Robyn, check this out. That's the 26 counties of the Panhandle. You know how big Texas is. A lot of people don't.
Yes.
That's the size of West Virginia. Right.
Yeah.
So we're covering a huge area. So it's not uncommon for us to drive 2.5 hours to deliver a placement package to a family within 24 hours of when that kiddo gets placed. So we can't do that without your support. And so we ask for folks to be a placement package partner. $100 a month buys us all the clothes we need for a placement package. $50 buys us a case of diapers, and $10 a month buys us one outfit a month. And so if you're interested, you can go to our website, panhandleorphan.org/donate, and you can sign up to be a placement package partner. We've got our Trade Wars fundraiser that's coming up in October. If you're interested in more on that, go to our website, panhandleorphan.org, and you can find out more about that. Again, thanks again so stinking much, Robyn, for coming on the podcast, and you guys have a great day.
Thank you.